My name is Charlotte Anderson. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how one simple text message completely destroyed my marriage and changed my life forever. My husband texted, "I'm going to the gym, don't wait for me." I replied, "And what happened next will shock you to your core." It was a Tuesday evening in March when my phone buzzed with what seemed like an ordinary message from my husband David. At that moment, I had no idea that this innocent-looking text would be the beginning of the most painful and transformative journey of my life. Little did I know that behind those simple words was hiding the biggest betrayal I could ever imagine. If you've ever felt that gut-wrenching moment when something just doesn't feel right in your relationship, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because what I'm about to share might help you recognize the signs one wish I had seen earlier. Have you ever received a message from someone you love that made your heart skip a beat? Not from excitement, but from an inexplicable feeling of dread. That's exactly what happened to me that day. I remember staring at my phone screen, reading David's message over and over again. Something about it felt different, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. "I'm going to the gym, don't wait for me." 7 simple words that would haunt me for weeks to come. David had been going to the gym regularly for about 6 months, and usually, he would just grab his bag and go without texting me about it. But this time, he felt the need to specifically tell me not to wait for him. The message came at 7 p.m., which was unusual because he typically went to the gym right after work around 5:30. I sat there in our living room, holding my phone, trying to understand why this message felt so wrong. The strangest part was how my body reacted before my mind could even process what was happening. My hands started trembling slightly, and I felt this cold sensation in my stomach. You know that feeling you get when you're about to hear bad news? I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid and overthinking a simple text message. But deep down, some primal instinct was screaming that something was terribly wrong. I remember looking around our beautiful home, at the pictures of us on the walls, at the life we had built together, and feeling like I was seeing it all for the first time. What I didn't know at that moment was that my subconscious had already picked up on all the subtle changes in David's behavior over the past few months. The way he guarded his phone more carefully, how he started working late more often, his sudden interest in fitness after years of being a couch potato. My intuition was trying to protect me, sending warning signals that my rational mind kept dismissing. But that night, as I sat alone in our house, waiting for a husband who told me not to wait, everything was about to come crashing down. You won't believe what I discovered when I decided to trust my instincts instead of his words. Before I tell you about the devastating discovery that turned my world upside down, let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like just 6 months earlier. David Thompson and I had been married for 7 years, and from the outside, we were the perfect couple that everyone envied at dinner parties and family gatherings. We had bought our dream house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, complete with a white picket fence and a golden retriever named Max. I was working as a marketing manager at a successful tech company, climbing the corporate ladder and earning more money than I ever thought possible. David was an accountant at a mid-sized firm, steady and reliable, or so I thought. I'm sharing this because I want you to understand that betrayal doesn't only happen in troubled relationships. It can shatter even the most seemingly perfect marriages. So please subscribe and hit that like button if you can relate to feeling blindsided by someone you trusted completely. Our relationship had always been built on what I believed was solid communication and mutual respect. We had our routines: Sunday morning pancakes, Friday night movie dates, and long conversations about our future dreams and goals. I trusted David with my life, my heart, and every secret I had ever kept. We talked about starting a family soon, maybe taking that trip to Italy we had been planning for years, and growing old together on our front porch. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to believe that a marriage could exist in such a perfect bubble forever. We rarely fought about anything serious, just silly disagreements about whose turn it was to take out the trash, or what to watch on Netflix. I thought our biggest problem was David's occasional tendency to leave dirty dishes in the sink. I used to complain to my friends about these minor annoyances, not knowing that soon I would give anything to go back to worrying about unwashed plates. Our intimacy was comfortable, our finances were stable, and our social life was active and fulfilling with a close-knit group of friends. The irony is that I actually encouraged David to start going to the gym when he mentioned wanting to get back in shape. I bought him new workout clothes for his birthday, helped him research the best gym memberships in our area, and even praised him for his dedication when he started going regularly. I was so proud of him for taking care of his health and making positive changes in his life. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that this gym membership would become the cover story for the affair that would destroy our marriage. I was actually happy that he was finding time for himself and pursuing personal goals. What makes this betrayal even more painful is that I was genuinely content with our life together. I wasn't one of those wives who suspected their husband of cheating or felt insecure about other women. I trusted him completely and never questioned his whereabouts or his intentions. I thought we had built something unbreakable, something that would weather any storm life could throw at us. But as you'll soon discover, the storm was already brewing right under my nose. And the gym membership was just the beginning of an elaborate web of lies. The worst part, I was about to find out that the woman he was having an affair with was someone I knew very well. Over the next few weeks after that strange text message, I started noticing small changes in David's behavior that I had been unconsciously ignoring for months. It began with little things that seemed innocent enough. He would shower immediately after coming home from his gym sessions, even though he used to be comfortable lounging around in his sweaty workout clothes. His phone, which used to sit casually on our kitchen counter during dinner, suddenly became glued to his side, face down and always within arm's reach. He started using a password on his device for the first time in our 7-year marriage, claiming it was for work security purposes. I remember asking him about it jokingly, and he got defensive in a way that was completely unlike his usual easygoing personality. These weren't dramatic red flags, just subtle shifts that made me feel like I was living with a stranger. The gym story itself started falling apart when I paid closer attention to the timeline and details. David would leave for his workouts at different times, sometimes 6 p.m., sometimes 7:30 p.m., and occasionally even claiming he needed to go on Saturday mornings for special training sessions. When I asked him about his fitness progress or what exercises he was doing, he would give vague answers like just cardio stuff or working with some weights. For someone who used to share every detail of his day with me, the sudden secrecy felt completely out of character. I even offered to join him at the gym a few times, thinking it could be something fun we could do together. But he quickly shut down the idea with various excuses. He claimed the gym was too crowded, or that he preferred working out alone to focus better. What really started to eat at me was the way he looked when he came home from these supposed gym sessions. Instead of looking tired and sweaty, like someone who had just finished an intense workout, David often seemed energized and almost happy in a way that felt different from his usual contentment. His skin would smell like soap and cologne rather than sweat, and his hair looked perfectly styled rather than messy from exercise. Sometimes I would catch him smiling at his phone while texting, and when I asked who he was talking to, he would quickly put it away and say it was just work stuff or one of the guys from the gym. The David I knew had never been particularly social at gyms before. He always preferred working out alone or with me. The most disturbing change was in our intimate life together. We went from being physically close and affectionate to living like roommates who happened to share a bed. David started coming to bed later, claiming he was too wired after his workouts to sleep early, and he would spend time scrolling on his phone in the dark. When we did have intimate moments, something felt different. He seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. I started to feel like I was competing with some invisible presence for my own husband's attention. The spontaneous kisses in the kitchen stopped. The random hugs while I was cooking dinner disappeared, and even our Sunday morning tradition of lazy cuddles became rushed and mechanical. Looking back, I realized my intuition was screaming at me during this time, but I kept making excuses for every red flag, because I desperately wanted to believe in the life we had built together. I would tell myself that maybe he was just stressed from work, or that married couples naturally go through phases of being less connected. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid and that questioning his gym routine was a sign of my own insecurities rather than legitimate concerns. But deep in my heart, I knew something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. The man I had fallen in love with was slowly disappearing, replaced by someone who felt like an actor playing the role of my husband. What I didn't know was that my worst fears were about to be confirmed in the most devastating way possible. The hardest part about suspecting your spouse of cheating isn't the fear of being right. It's the fear of being wrong and destroying your relationship with accusations based on paranoia. I started having sleepless nights lying next to David while he slept peacefully, wondering if the man beside me was living a double life. My mind would race with questions. Was I losing my sanity over nothing? Or was my husband really capable of betraying 7 years of marriage? I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare where every innocent explanation could be true, but every suspicious behavior could also be evidence of something much darker. The uncertainty was eating me alive, and I found myself analyzing every word, every gesture, every late arrival home with the intensity of a detective. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, suspicious, anxious, and constantly on edge. If you've ever been in a situation where your gut instincts are telling you something is wrong but you're afraid to face the truth, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because you'll understand exactly what I'm going through right now. The fear of confronting David about my suspicions paralyzed me for weeks, because I knew that once I asked the question, there would be no going back to our innocent, trusting relationship. Either he would reassure me and I would feel terrible for doubting him, or he would confirm my worst fears and our marriage would be over. I started imagining both scenarios obsessively, the relief I would feel if I was wrong, and the complete devastation if I was right. But staying silent felt like I was slowly poisoning myself with doubt and anxiety. I began doing things I never thought I was capable of, like checking his credit card statements online when he was in the shower, looking for unusual charges or restaurant receipts that didn't match his stories. I found myself driving past his office building on my lunch breaks, to see if his car was actually there when he claimed to be working late. One evening, I even drove by the gym he said he was attending, scanning the parking lot for his silver Honda, but I never had the courage to actually go inside and look for him. These behaviors made me feel sick to my stomach because I was becoming someone I had always judged, a paranoid wife who snooped on her husband. But I couldn't stop myself from searching for proof that would either put my fears to rest or confirm my suspicions. The emotional toll of living in this constant state of uncertainty was devastating. I lost weight because anxiety killed my appetite, and my work performance suffered because I couldn't concentrate on anything except analyzing David's behavior patterns. My friends started commenting that I seemed distracted and stressed, but I couldn't bring myself to voice my suspicions out loud, because saying them would make them feel too real. I felt completely alone in my fear, unable to confide in anyone because admitting that my perfect marriage might be a lie felt like admitting failure. Every day felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to act normal while my entire world felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. What scared me most wasn't just the possibility that David was cheating. It was the realization that if he was capable of lying to me so convincingly about something this big, then I had never really known him at all. The man I had trusted with my deepest secrets, my future plans, and my heart might have been deceiving me for months, while I praised him for his dedication to fitness. I started questioning every memory, every conversation, every moment of intimacy we had shared recently, wondering what was real and what was performance. The David who kissed me goodbye each morning might be the same David who was texting another woman, and that thought made me feel like I was living with a complete stranger. But as you'll soon discover, the truth was so much worse than anything my fearful imagination had conjured up. The discovery happened on a Thursday morning in April, exactly 3 weeks after that first suspicious text message that had been haunting my thoughts. I was running late for work and realized I had left my phone charger in David's car from our weekend trip to visit his parents. He had already left for the office, so I used my spare key to grab it from his glove compartment, thinking it would be a quick 30-second task. But when I opened the car door, David's work phone was sitting on the passenger seat, the phone he never forgot because it contained all his important client information. I knew he would need it for his morning meetings, so I decided to be a good wife and drive it to his office before heading to my own job. Little did I know that this simple act of kindness would destroy my marriage and change my life forever. If you've ever had that moment where your entire reality crumbled in an instant, please subscribe and hit that like button, because you'll understand the devastation I'm about to describe. As I was driving to David's office, his phone kept buzzing with text notifications, and the screen would light up each time. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was literally just glancing at it because the constant buzzing was distracting while I was driving. But then I saw a preview of a message that made my blood run cold. Can't wait to see you tonight at our usual place. I miss the way you... The message was cut off, but I could see it was from someone named Gym Buddy Sarah with a heart emoji next to the name. My hand started shaking so badly that I had to pull over to the side of the road. Sitting in that parking lot, staring at David's phone, I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. The rational part of my brain was trying to find innocent explanations. Maybe Sarah was just a friendly gym partner who was being overly familiar. Maybe the message was meant for someone else. But when more messages kept coming in, each one more intimate than the last, I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about your hands on my body. My husband is working late again tonight, so we have plenty of time. I love how you make me feel when we're together. Each message felt like a knife stabbing directly into my heart, confirming every fear and suspicion I had been carrying for weeks. What made it even worse was recognizing who Sarah was. Sarah Mitchell, the wife of David's coworker Tom, someone we had spent countless evenings with at dinner parties and barbecues. I had always thought Sarah was a sweet woman, a little quiet but friendly enough, and I had never suspected that she was capable of something like this. She had sat in my living room, complimented my cooking, and asked me for marriage advice while she was secretly sleeping with my husband. The betrayal wasn't just coming from David, it was coming from someone in our social circle, someone who had looked me in the eye and smiled while stabbing me in the back. I felt sick to my stomach thinking about all the times the four of us had hung out together, wondering when this affair had started and how long they had been laughing at my cluelessness. The worst message came through while I was sitting there in shock. I think Charlotte is getting suspicious. She keeps asking questions about your gym routine. We need to be more careful, but I don't want to stop seeing you. You make me feel more alive than I've felt in years. Reading my own name in their intimate conversation felt like being punched in the stomach and having my heart ripped out simultaneously. They had been discussing me, analyzing my behavior, treating me like an obstacle in their love story, rather than a human being whose life they were destroying. I realized that every time David had come home from his gym sessions, and I had asked innocent questions, he had been reporting back to his mistress about my level of suspicion. The man I had trusted with everything had turned me into the villain in his affair narrative, and that betrayal cut deeper than anything else. After discovering those messages, I drove home in a complete daze, feeling like I was watching someone else's life fall apart rather than my own. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years because I couldn't imagine sitting in meetings and pretending everything was normal, when my entire identity as a wife and partner had just been obliterated. The woman who had woken up that morning thinking she had a loving, faithful husband was gone forever, replaced by someone who felt stupid, naive, and completely worthless. I spent the day wandering around our house like a ghost, looking at our wedding photos and wondering how long David had been lying to me about loving me. Every shared memory now felt contaminated by the knowledge that he was capable of such elaborate deception while looking me straight in the eye and telling me he loved me. The most devastating part wasn't just discovering the affair, it was realizing how thoroughly I had been manipulated and gaslit for months without even knowing it. David had been coming home from sleeping with another woman and kissing me goodnight, telling me about his day while carefully editing out the most important part of his story. He had been comforting me when I felt insecure about our relationship, reassuring me that I was being paranoid, all while knowing that my instincts were absolutely correct. I felt like the biggest fool in the world for believing his lies, for encouraging his gym membership, for trusting him so completely. The confident, successful woman I had always been was crumbling under the weight of this betrayal, replaced by someone who questioned her own judgment and intuition about everything. What hurt almost as much as the affair itself was how it destroyed my sense of self-worth and attractiveness. I found myself standing in front of our bedroom mirror, comparing myself to what I imagined Sarah looked like, wondering what she had that I didn't. Was I not pretty enough? Not exciting enough? Not good enough to keep my own husband interested? I started picking apart every aspect of myself, my appearance, my personality, my career success, my abilities as a partner. The voice in my head became cruel and relentless. If you were a better wife, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. Maybe you've been too focused on work and not enough on your marriage. Perhaps you're just not the kind of woman men want to stay faithful to. These thoughts poisoned every moment of my day, making me feel worthless and unlovable. I began questioning everything I thought I knew about myself and my relationship skills. Had I been a bad wife without realizing it? Was I so caught up in my career that I had neglected David's emotional needs? Maybe I wasn't as good a partner as I thought, and that's why he felt the need to find intimacy with someone else. I started replaying every conversation, every interaction, every moment of our recent months together, looking for clues about what I had done wrong to push him into another woman's arms. The successful, confident marketing manager, who had always trusted her instincts and decision-making abilities, was now second-guessing every thought and feeling, wondering if I was even capable of accurately reading a situation or understanding another person's motivations. The hardest part was facing the reality that the man I had planned to grow old with, the person I thought knew me better than anyone else in the world, had been living a complete double life for months. If David could deceive me so thoroughly about something this fundamental, what else had he been lying about throughout our entire relationship? I started wondering if he had ever truly loved me, or if I had been convenient, comfortable, and safe while he searched for something more exciting. The foundation of trust that I thought our marriage was built on had been completely destroyed, and I felt like I was falling through empty space with nothing solid to hold on to. But as you'll discover, this rock-bottom moment was about to become the catalyst for the most empowering decision of my entire life. After spending 3 days in bed, crying and feeling sorry for myself, something inside me shifted from devastation to determination. I realized that I had two choices. I could continue to let David's betrayal define me and destroy my sense of self-worth, or I could take back control of my life and show him exactly what he had lost. The turning point came when I was looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, eyes swollen from crying, hair unwashed for days, and I barely recognized the broken woman staring back at me. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront David with tears and accusations. I wasn't going to beg him to choose me over Sarah. And I certainly wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Instead, I was going to handle this situation with the same strategic thinking I used in my professional life, and I was going to make sure he understood the consequences of his choices in the most powerful way possible. If you've ever reached that moment where pain transforms into power and you decide to take control of your own story, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because what I did next will inspire you to never let anyone treat you as an option when you're giving them your everything. The first step in my plan was to gather concrete evidence of the affair, not because I needed proof for myself, those text messages were more than enough, but because I wanted to be prepared for whatever came next. I spent the weekend carefully documenting everything I had discovered, taking screenshots of the messages, noting dates and times of his suspicious behavior, and creating a timeline of lies he had told me. I felt like a detective building a case, and for the first time in days, I felt sharp and focused instead of broken and confused. What surprised me most was how calm and clear-headed I became once I stopped trying to save my marriage and started planning its end. The crying stopped, the self-doubt quieted, and the confident woman I had always been started to emerge from the wreckage of my broken heart. I realized that David's affair wasn't a reflection of my worth as a woman or a wife. It was a reflection of his character and his ability to betray someone who had given him nothing but love and loyalty. I stopped analyzing what I might have done wrong and started focusing on what I was going to do right. The victim mentality that had consumed me for days was replaced by something much more powerful. The mindset of a woman who knew her worth and refused to accept anything less than she deserved. I decided that I wasn't going to have a dramatic confrontation where I screamed and threw things and gave him the opportunity to manipulate me with more lies and false promises. Instead, I was going to show him through actions rather than words exactly how I felt about his betrayal. The plan that formed in my mind was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its impact. I was going to pack up all of David's belongings and deliver them directly to Sarah's house, along with copies of their text messages, and a note explaining that, since they clearly preferred each other's company, they could now have it permanently. I wanted both of them to understand that their secret affair was no longer secret, and that I was done being the unknowing third wheel in their relationship. The most empowering part of this decision was realizing that I didn't need David's permission or explanation to end our marriage. I didn't need to give him the chance to lie to me again, to make excuses, or to try to convince me that the affair didn't mean anything. His actions had already told me everything I needed to know about how much our marriage meant to him, and my response was going to show him exactly what kind of woman he had chosen to betray. For the first time since discovering those messages, I felt like myself again, strong, decisive, and completely in control of my own destiny. What happened next would not only give me closure, but would also teach both David and Sarah a lesson they would never forget. On Monday morning, after David left for work with his usual kiss on the cheek, and have a great day as if nothing had changed, I took a personal day and began the most therapeutic task of my life, packing up 7 years of his presence in our home. I started with his clothes, methodically folding each shirt, each pair of pants, each piece of underwear that had shared space with mine in our dresser for so many years. What I expected to be an emotional and painful process turned out to be incredibly empowering and cathartic. With each item I placed in the boxes, I felt a piece of my anger and hurt transforming into something much more powerful, a sense of liberation and self-respect that I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't destroying his things or acting out of spite. I was simply removing the belongings of someone who had chosen not to belong in my life anymore. As I worked through our shared spaces, I found myself discovering things about our relationship that I had never noticed before. His side of the bathroom counter was cluttered with expensive grooming products I didn't remember him buying, clearly purchased to impress someone who wasn't his wife. There were clothes in his wardrobe with tags still on them, outfits I had never seen him wear, styles that were completely different from his usual conservative look. I realized he had been reinventing himself for this affair, becoming someone new and exciting for Sarah, while staying the same old predictable husband for me. Each discovery reinforced that I was making the right decision. This man had been living a double life, and I deserved so much better than being someone's safety net while they explored their true desires with someone else. The process of packing became a form of meditation and self-discovery. I found myself thinking clearly for the first time in weeks, making mental notes about what kind of life I wanted to build without him. As I wrapped his golf trophies in newspaper, I realized I had always hated how much space they took up on our mantle. When I packed his collection of boring finance books, I remembered how many times I had suggested we travel instead of him spending weekends reading about investment strategies. I was literally packing away not just his belongings, but also all the compromises I had made to accommodate his preferences and dreams, while putting my own on the back burner. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my opportunity to create a life that truly reflected who I was and what I wanted. What surprised me most was how light and spacious our house felt with each box I filled. Rooms that had felt cluttered and cramped suddenly seemed airy and full of possibilities. I could already envision redecorating in colors and styles that David had never liked, filling the space with things that brought me joy, rather than things that represented our compromise. The master bedroom, which had felt like a crime scene for the past few days, started to feel like my sanctuary again once his presence was removed. I began to understand that I hadn't just been sharing my home with David, I had been shrinking myself to make room for someone who didn't appreciate the space I had given him in my life. By the end of the day, I had 17 boxes stacked neatly in our garage, each one labeled with its contents in my careful handwriting. Looking at them lined up like that, I felt a profound sense of completion and closure. These boxes represented the physical evidence of a life shared with someone who had betrayed my trust. But they also represented my refusal to continue being disrespected in my own home. Tomorrow I would deliver them to Sarah's house along with the evidence of their affair, and then I would be free to start rebuilding my life without the weight of David's deception. The woman who had been crying in bed 3 days ago was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and was ready to fight for the life she deserved. But the real power move was still to come. The next morning, as I loaded the 17 boxes into my SUV, I felt a calmness that surprised me more than any emotion I had experienced throughout this entire ordeal. The woman who had discovered those text messages 5 days ago would never have imagined she was capable of such decisive strategic action. I wasn't acting out of rage or vengeance. I was acting out of self-respect and a clear understanding of what I deserved in a relationship. Each box that I carefully placed in my car represented not just David's belongings, but also my refusal to accept being treated as a second choice in my own marriage. The physical act of moving his life out of our shared space had given me a sense of control and power that no amount of crying or confrontation ever could have provided. What struck me most as I drove toward Sarah's neighborhood was how peaceful I felt, despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. I had expected to be nervous, angry, or emotional, but instead I felt like I was simply completing a necessary task, like returning borrowed items to their rightful owner. In my mind, that's exactly what I was doing, returning David to the woman he had chosen over his wife. along with all the belongings that represented the life he had decided to throw away. I had even included a carefully written note explaining that since they clearly preferred each other's company to respecting their marriages, they were now free to be together without the burden of deceiving their spouses. The note was polite, direct, and completely free of the emotional drama they probably expected from a betrayed wife. As I pulled into Sarah's driveway at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, knowing that her husband Tom would be at work and she would be alone, I felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone or create chaos in their lives. I was simply making their secret relationship a matter of public record between the people it affected most. Sarah had made the choice to sleep with my husband, and now she could deal with the natural consequences of that choice. I rang the doorbell with the same confidence I used when presenting marketing campaigns to executives, carrying myself with the dignity of a woman who knew her worth and refused to be disrespected. When Sarah opened the door, her face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. First confusion at seeing me on her doorstep, then recognition, then a dawning horror as she saw the boxers stacked behind me and realized what was happening. I handed her the note and simply said, "These belong to David now. Since you two have decided you prefer each other's company, I thought it would be more convenient if his things were at your house." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. The woman who had been so bold and passionate in her text messages to my husband suddenly seemed very small and powerless when faced with the reality of her choices. The most empowering moment came when I turned to walk back to my car, without waiting for her response or explanation. I didn't need to hear her excuses, her apologies, or her attempts to minimize what she had done. My actions had spoken louder than any words ever could, and I had delivered my message with the kind of class and dignity that she and David had completely lacked in their affair. As I drove away, leaving Sarah standing in her doorway surrounded by boxers of another woman's husband's belongings, I felt a closure that no amount of crying or confrontation could have provided. I had taken control of my narrative, and for the first time in days, I felt truly free. But the real test of my strength was still coming when David came home that evening. David came home that Tuesday evening at exactly 5:47 p.m., 30 minutes earlier than his usual time, and I could hear the panic in his voice as he called my name from the front door. I was sitting calmly in our living room, reading a book with a cup of tea, looking exactly like the composed and confident woman I had always been before. His lies had temporarily shaken my self-image. When he rushed into the room, his face flushed and his eyes wild with panic, I looked up from my book as if he were simply arriving home from a normal day at work. "Hello, David," I said with the same pleasant tone I had used to greet him every evening for 7 years. Except now it carried the weight of someone who was completely in control of the situation and utterly at peace with her decisions. If you've ever had to face someone who betrayed you, and found the strength to do it with dignity and grace instead of anger and tears, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because what happened next will show you the power of responding to betrayal with class, rather than chaos. David immediately started talking rapidly, stumbling over words as he tried to explain and make excuses, before I had even acknowledged that I knew about the affair. "Charlotte, I can explain everything. Sarah called me at work. She said you came by with boxers, but it's not what you think. I swear I can explain." His panic and desperation were so obvious that I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered how easily he had lied to me for months, and my sympathy evaporated completely. I let him ramble for a full minute before I calmly placed my bookmark in my book and set it aside. "David," I said in the same tone I used during business presentations, "I'm not interested in your explanations or excuses. I found the text messages on your phone. I know about the affair with Sarah, and I know you've been lying to me for months while pretending to go to the gym." His face went completely white as he realized that I had concrete evidence and wasn't operating on suspicions or assumptions. I continued with the same calm, measured tone. "I've packed your belongings and delivered them to Sarah's house because I assume that's where you'd prefer to be living since you've been spending so much time there anyway. I've already contacted a lawyer, and divorce papers will be filed by the end of the week. I'm not interested in fighting about this, working through it, or listening to promises about how it will never happen again." What surprised me most was how small and pathetic David looked as I spoke to him with the same respect I would show a business colleague, rather than the emotional breakdown he had probably expected from a betrayed wife. He kept trying to interrupt me with explanations and apologies, but I held up my hand and continued speaking as if I were presenting quarterly results to a board of directors. The house is in my name. The car you've been driving to your affairs is in my name, and most of our shared assets were purchased with my income. You're welcome to take whatever belongings I may have missed when I packed your things, but I expect you to be moved out completely by this weekend. The professional, business-like tone seemed to disturb him more than screaming and crying would have, because it made it clear that this wasn't an emotional decision I might change my mind about. The most powerful moment came when David fell to his knees in our living room and started begging me to reconsider, promising that the affair meant nothing and that he would never see Sarah again if I would just give him another chance. I looked down at this man who had shared my bed for 7 years, while texting another woman about missing her body, and I felt absolutely nothing except a mild disgust that I had ever trusted someone with such weak character. "David," I said, standing up from my chair and looking down at him with the same expression I would use for a disappointing employee. "A man who would betray his wife for months and lie to her face every single day doesn't deserve a second chance. I hope Sarah makes you happy, because you've lost the best thing that ever happened to you." As I walked upstairs to our bedroom, now just my bedroom, leaving him kneeling on the floor, I realized that the woman I had become was so much stronger than the woman I had been before his betrayal. The first week after David moved out was a revelation that I never could have anticipated. I woke up on Saturday morning in complete silence. No one snoring beside me. No one hogging the bathroom. No one asking what was for breakfast, or commenting on my choice of weekend activities. For the first time in 7 years, my time was completely my own, and instead of feeling lonely, I felt liberated in a way that shocked me. I made myself an elaborate breakfast with fresh strawberries and real maple syrup, something David would have criticized as too indulgent for a weekend morning, and I ate it while reading a romance novel that he would have called mindless trash. Every small decision I made that day was purely for my own pleasure, and I realized how many tiny compromises I had been making for years without even noticing them. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since college. I spent an entire day exploring my own city like a tourist. I visited art galleries that David had always claimed were pretentious. I bought myself fresh flowers from the farmer's market just because they were beautiful, and I sat in a coffee shop for 3 hours, people watching and journaling about my thoughts and feelings, without his constant commentary about how we should be spending our time more productively. I discovered that I actually enjoyed slow, contemplative activities that had nothing to do with achievement or efficiency. I remembered that before I became Mrs. David Thompson, I had been Charlotte Anderson, a woman with her own interests, dreams, and ways of finding joy in simple moments. The physical changes in my living space were just as transformative as the emotional ones. I moved furniture around to create better flow and lighting. I bought plants that David had always said were too much work, and I hung artwork that reflected my personal taste, rather than our compromised aesthetic. The house began to feel like my sanctuary, rather than our shared territory, and I started sleeping better than I had in months. Without David's presence, I could spread out in bed, keep the temperature exactly where I liked it, and fall asleep to podcasts about psychology and personal growth instead of his boring financial news programs. Every small change reinforced that I had been living someone else's idea of a good life, rather than creating my own. I also began reconnecting with parts of myself that had been dormant during my marriage. I signed up for a photography class I had wanted to take for years. I started cooking exotic cuisines that David had always rejected as too spicy or too weird. And I even bought a bicycle and started exploring the bike trails around our city. Each new activity reminded me that I was an interesting, capable woman with diverse interests and the ability to create joy in my own life. I didn't need a man to make my life complete or meaningful. I needed the freedom to be authentically myself without constantly considering someone else's preferences and limitations. The most surprising discovery was how much I enjoyed my own company. I had been so afraid of being alone after the divorce, but solitude turned out to be the greatest gift I could have given myself. Without David's constant presence and opinions, I could think clearly about what I actually wanted from my life, my career, and my future relationships. I started setting boundaries with friends who had always treated me as half of a couple, rather than a complete person. and I began making plans that were based solely on my own interests and goals. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life, rather than performing the role of someone's wife. The woman who had emerged from the ashes of my marriage was stronger, more confident, and more authentically herself than I had ever been before. 3 weeks after David moved out, I received a phone call from my sister Emma that changed my perspective on everything that had happened. She told me something I had never expected to hear. "Charlotte, I have to be honest with you, I never liked David, and I'm actually relieved that you're getting divorced." Emma went on to explain that she and other family members had always felt like David was controlling, and that I had seemed to dim my own light to avoid outshining him. She said they had watched me become smaller and more careful over the years, always checking his reactions before expressing opinions or making decisions. Hearing this from someone who loved me unconditionally made me realize that David's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had actually freed me from a relationship that was slowly suffocating the real me without my even realizing it. This revelation sparked a period of deep self-reflection about the woman I had been before David, and the woman I wanted to become moving forward. I began to understand that I had been so focused on being a good wife that I had forgotten how to be a complete, authentic person. I had been editing myself constantly, my opinions, my dreams, my natural personality to fit into David's vision of what our life together should look like. The successful marketing executive who could command a boardroom had somehow become someone who asked permission to redecorate her own living room, or felt guilty for spending money on things that brought her joy. The affair had been devastating, but it had also been the wake-up call I desperately needed to reclaim my own identity and power. I started making a list of all the things I had wanted to do during my marriage but had talked myself out of because David wouldn't have approved or participated. The list was longer than I expected. Traveling to art festivals in Europe, taking salsa dancing lessons, starting a side business, selling my photography, learning to speak Italian, buying a convertible car, and decorating my home in bold colors and patterns that reflected my personality rather than his conservative taste. Each item on the list represented a piece of myself that I had sacrificed for the sake of marital harmony. And now I had the freedom to pursue every single one of them without having to consider anyone else's preferences or limitations. The dating apps and well-meaning friends kept asking when I would be ready to start looking for someone new. But I realized that I wasn't interested in replacing David with another man right away. Instead, I wanted to spend time falling in love with myself and the life I was creating independently. I was rediscovering the joy of making decisions based purely on what made me happy, of having conversations that weren't filtered through concern about how my partner would react, of dreaming big dreams that didn't require anyone else's approval or participation. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about my future and all the possibilities it held. The most beautiful part of this transformation was realizing that David's betrayal, while incredibly painful, had been the catalyst for the most important relationship of my life, the one with myself. I was learning to trust my own instincts again, to value my own opinions, and to prioritize my own happiness, without feeling guilty or selfish. The woman who had been devastated by discovering those text messages was gone, replaced by someone who was grateful for the opportunity to start over and create a life that was authentically hers. I began to see that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can actually be the best thing, because it forces you to become the person you were always meant to be. But the real test of my transformation was yet to come, when I ran into David and Sarah together in public. 2 months after my divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop when I saw David and Sarah walk in together, holding hands and looking like a couple who believed they had found true love. Instead of feeling angry or hurt, I felt something I never would have expected: genuine gratitude for the role they had played in setting me free from a life that wasn't authentically mine. If you've ever reached the point where you can thank the person who broke your heart because they ultimately saved your life, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because you understand that sometimes our greatest pain becomes our greatest teacher. Watching them together, I realized that David had actually done me the biggest favor of my life by showing me his true character. Before I wasted any more years trying to build a future with someone who was capable of such profound betrayal, the woman who had discovered those text messages would have been devastated to see them looking happy together. But the woman I had become felt only relief that I was no longer tied to someone with such weak integrity and poor judgment. David looked older and more stressed than I remembered, while Sarah kept glancing around nervously as if she expected to be judged by everyone in the coffee shop. I realized that people who build relationships on deception and betrayal never truly feel secure, because they know deep down that if someone will cheat with you, they will eventually cheat on you. Their relationship was founded on lies and the destruction of 2 marriages, and that foundation would never be solid enough to support lasting happiness or trust. What struck me most was how small and insignificant they seemed, compared to the enormous impact they had once had on my life. The man who had once been the center of my world, whose opinion had mattered more than my own, now looked like a stranger who had nothing to do with the confident, successful woman I had become. I thought about all the nights I had cried over losing him, all the self-doubt I had experienced about my worth as a woman and a partner, and I felt amazed at how completely my perspective had shifted. The end of my marriage hadn't been a failure, it had been a graduation into a better version of myself, and David had been nothing more than a stepping stone to my own empowerment. I finished my coffee and walked past their table on my way out, and when David looked up and saw me, his face went pale with what I could only describe as shame and regret. I gave him the same polite nod I would give any acquaintance and continued walking, feeling absolutely nothing except a mild curiosity about whether he ever realized what he had lost. Sarah avoided making eye contact completely, which told me everything I needed to know about how comfortable she was with the choices she had made. Their discomfort in my presence was the final confirmation that I had handled the entire situation with the grace and dignity that they had completely lacked throughout their affair. The most beautiful realization came as I walked to my car, thinking about how dramatically my life had changed for the better since that devastating day when I discovered their betrayal. I had a successful career that I was more passionate about than ever, a home that reflected my personal style and brought me joy every day, friendships that were deeper and more authentic than they had ever been during my marriage, and most importantly, a relationship with myself that was built on self-respect and genuine self-love. David's betrayal had forced me to confront the ways I had been diminishing myself to accommodate someone else's limitations, and in losing him, I had found the most important thing of all, my own worth and power. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you really is the best thing, because it destroys the life that was holding you back, and forces you to build the life you were always meant to live. As I drove home that day, I realized that my story wasn't unique. Millions of people stay in relationships that diminish them, accepting less than they deserve because they're afraid of being alone or starting over. The difference is that some people get the wake-up call I received, while others spend their entire lives wondering what might have been if they had found the courage to choose themselves over settling for someone who didn't appreciate their worth. If you're watching this video, there's probably something in your own life that you're settling for. Some relationship or situation where you're making yourself smaller to avoid conflict or abandonment. The question you need to ask yourself is this: what would happen if you stopped being afraid of losing what you have, and started getting excited about what you could create? Maybe you're in a relationship right now where you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, editing your thoughts and dreams to avoid your partner's criticism or disapproval. Perhaps you're staying with someone who makes you feel like you're asking for too much, when you want basic respect, honesty, and emotional support. Or maybe you're like I was, thinking you have a good relationship because there's no obvious abuse or betrayal, not realizing that you've been slowly suffocating your authentic self to maintain peace. The truth is that a relationship that requires you to be less than who you really are isn't a relationship worth saving. No matter how much history you've shared or how scary the alternative seems, I want you to think about the person you were before you started compromising yourself for someone else's comfort. Before you started asking permission for things that should be your autonomous choices. Before you started believing that your natural personality was somehow too much or not enough. That person is still inside you, waiting for permission to come back to life and create something beautiful with the freedom you're too afraid to claim. Every day you stay in a situation that diminishes you is another day you're not living the life you were meant to have. Another day you're not becoming the person you were meant to be. Another day you're not experiencing the joy and fulfillment that comes from living authentically. The hardest part about choosing yourself is that it often looks selfish to people who benefit from your self-sacrifice. But there's nothing selfish about refusing to accept treatment that damages your soul and limits your potential. David thought I was being cruel and heartless when I packed his things and refused to fight for our marriage. But what I was actually doing was honoring both of us by refusing to participate in a relationship built on lies and betrayal. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop enabling someone's bad behavior and force them to face the consequences of their choices, even if it means walking away from everything you thought you wanted. If my story resonates with you, if you're ready to stop settling for less than you deserve and start building a life that reflects your worth and values, then I want you to watch my next video, where I'll share the specific steps I took to rebuild my confidence, set boundaries, and create a life that brings me genuine joy every single day. Don't let fear of the unknown keep you trapped in a known situation that's slowly killing your spirit. Your authentic, empowered life is waiting for you to be brave enough to claim it. Click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and remember that you have everything within you right now to transform your pain into power and your setbacks into comebacks. The only question is, are you ready to choose yourself? Looking back on this journey from that devastating text message to the empowered woman I am today, I can honestly say that David's betrayal was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Even though it was wrapped in the most painful experience of my life, the Charlotte who discovered those messages was living a half life, compromising her dreams and dimming her light to maintain a relationship with someone who was never worthy of her loyalty and trust. The Charlotte sitting here today is fully alive, authentically herself, and completely in control of her own destiny. I've learned that betrayal doesn't define your worth. Your response to betrayal reveals your character, and my response showed me that I was stronger, more resilient, and more capable of creating happiness than I had ever imagined possible. If you're at the beginning of your own journey from heartbreak to empowerment, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because I want to be part of your transformation story, just like sharing mine has been part of my healing process. The most important lesson I learned is that you can't control what other people do to you, but you have complete control over how you respond and what you choose to build from the pieces of your broken expectations. David chose deception, manipulation, and selfishness. I chose dignity, self-respect, and the courage to start over. His choices reflected his character. My choices reflected mine, and I'm proud of the woman I became when life tested my strength and resilience. Every morning when I wake up in my beautifully decorated bedroom, in my peaceful home, surrounded by evidence of the life I've created for myself, I feel grateful for the journey that brought me here. I travel whenever I want, pursue hobbies that bring me joy, maintain friendships that nourish my soul, and make every decision based on what feels authentic and fulfilling to me. The woman who was afraid to redecorate her living room without her husband's approval is now running her own consulting business, has visited 12 countries in the past 2 years, and owns a home that reflects her personality completely. I'm dating again, but this time I know my worth, and I refuse to settle for anyone who doesn't appreciate and celebrate the full version of who I am. The most beautiful part of my transformation is that I genuinely hope David and Sarah find happiness together, because their betrayal set me free to become the person I was always meant to be. I don't carry anger or resentment anymore. Those emotions were just weighing me down and preventing me from fully embracing the joy that was waiting for me. Forgiveness isn't about excusing their behavior or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about refusing to let their poor choices continue to have power over your peace and happiness. The best revenge truly is living well, and I'm living better than I ever thought possible. To everyone who has made it to the end of this story with me, thank you for allowing me to share the most transformative experience of my life with you. If you're struggling with betrayal, settling for less than you deserve, or afraid to choose yourself over a situation that's diminishing you, remember that you have everything within you right now to create the life you deserve. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because I'll be sharing more stories about transformation, empowerment, and the courage to choose yourself even when it's scary. Your authentic, joyful life is waiting for you. The only question is whether you're brave enough to claim it. And trust me, you are braver and stronger than you know. As we reach the end of this incredible journey together, I want you to take a moment and think about your own life and the stories you're telling yourself about what you deserve and what you're capable of creating. My story began with a devastating text message that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. But it ended with me discovering a strength and authenticity I never knew I possessed. The woman who was crying in her bedroom, feeling worthless and broken, transformed into someone who packed up her cheating husband's belongings and delivered them to his. mistress with the grace and dignity of a queen. That transformation didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't easy. But it was the most important work I've ever done in my life. Every tear I shed, every moment of doubt I faced, every scary decision I made to choose myself over settling for less, all of it led me to the life I'm living now. After hearing my story, what would you have done in my place? What's your take on revenge, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to start over when someone you love betrays your trust? I want to hear from you in the comments, because your perspective and your own experiences matter just as much as mine. Do you believe revenge ever truly brings peace? Or does it just feed more anger and keep you trapped in the past? For me, the greatest revenge was refusing to let David's betrayal define my worth or limit my potential for happiness. The greatest victory was becoming someone who was grateful for the experience, because it forced me to become the person I was always meant to be. But everyone's journey is different, and I respect whatever path leads you to healing and empowerment. The truth is that this story isn't really about David, Sarah, or even the affair that destroyed my marriage. It's about the moment when you decide that you're worth more than whatever situation is diminishing your light and holding you back from living authentically. It's about recognizing that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually life's way of clearing space for something infinitely better. It's about understanding that you don't need anyone else's permission or approval to choose yourself and start creating the life you deserve. My marriage ending was devastating, but it was also the beginning of the most empowering chapter of my life, and I wouldn't change a single moment of that journey. If you want more stories like this, more conversations about transformation, empowerment, and the courage to choose yourself even when it's terrifying, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because I'll be here sharing more of my journey and hopefully inspiring yours. Remember that you have everything within you right now to handle whatever life throws your way with grace, dignity, and strength. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and capable of creating more joy and fulfillment than you can currently imagine. Your authentic life is waiting for you to be courageous enough to claim it. Thank you for joining me on this journey from heartbreak to empowerment. I'll see you in the next video, where I'll be sharing the specific strategies I use to rebuild my confidence, set healthy boundaries, and create a daily routine that supports the life I wanted to build. Until then, remember that you deserve to be chosen, respected, and loved authentically. And if someone in your life isn't giving you that, maybe it's time to choose yourself instead.